Why is there so much suffering in the world? It seems like everywhere we look, there are people languishing in pain. Indeed, you might be one of them. It's a commonality that most of us share, yet few discuss openly. We either don't like to put our burdens on others or feel as though they won't understand, and so we keep it inside and suffer in silence. Because of this, that suffering compounds and continues to get worse. But does it have to be that way? Can suffering be there to teach us something we need to know to advance upwards? Can suffering be a gift? If you're listening to this, I bet you anything you are no stranger to suffering. You've probably been beaten down so bad, you can hardly imagine how you could ever stand up again. You've experienced emotional, mental, and maybe even physical pain along this path. You may even still be experiencing it. And you may be asking why. You may be asking very valid questions such as, what did I do to deserve this? Why is this happening to me? Why can't I find relief? Well, I promise you, you are not alone. Suffering is certainly nothing new, as it seems to be reaching a boiling point. More and more people are admitting that they are suffering from mental health issues, depression, anxiety, insomnia. It mostly has to do with the mind. But the mind generates pain within the body, maladies within the body. And so everything begins there. So in order to understand this epidemic of suffering, we have to start with the mind and why it feels so split. Now, the best way for me to articulate this to you is through my own experience, because that's all I have. For me, my mental health issues started when I was a teenager. Most teenage girls today do suffer from some sort of mental disorder. You can chalk that up to not feeling like they fit in our society, which is completely valid. But I'm willing to bet that there is something more to that than just superficial appearances. I think it begins in your teenage years because that's when you start to become aware of the world around you. That's when you start to become more autonomous. You look around and you see people crafting identities, personalities. And when you have low self-esteem, for whatever reason, you begin this inadequacy complex. You start to think you're less than. And so the mental health issues begin. You see children under 10 on medications nowadays because they are so full of anxiety. Now, what is that? Why are children who live in first world countries, like this isn't an epidemic of third world countries, anxiety, no. This is a first world epidemic. To the people who seemingly have everything, they are increasingly getting sicker in their minds and their bodies. In my opinion, that is because we have detached ourselves so much from spirit that we don't have that inner voice pulling us forward, out of the darkness, navigating us away from that inner pain that only serves to distract us from our true nature. And the world around us doesn't help, especially when we're a teenager and we're trying to find answers. The world's solution is just to medicate you, put you on pills that'll calm you down, or change who you are altogether, without addressing the underlying issue. Who are you? Why are you here? What are you going to do about it? I think we are at a crisis of meaning. We've been told to be a certain way, to strive for certain things. Job positions, marriage, house, money. None of these things actually will make you happy, but society has convinced you that you are inadequate if you don't have them. The anxiety begins early, in your teenage years when you begin to be prepped for this world that you're supposed to enter, that you're supposed to thrive in, but you're not being given the main tool that will help you navigate, a connection to spirit, a connection to you. And so you suffer, and you continue to suffer, and it gets worse and worse in your mind until it manifests in your body. Dis-ease within the body begins in the mind. But when you are in the midst of suffering, it's difficult to see it that way. It's difficult to see that you're causing it. Nobody likes that, do they? Nobody wants to think that they are causing their own suffering. That is too difficult to face, right? Because if it's you, then only you can get you out of it. No pill can do it. No therapy session. No vacation. It has to be you. And that feels really heavy. That feels really hard. And that can even make the suffering worse. I became depressed around 15, 16 years old. And it lasted through the rest of my teenage years, in my 20s, and didn't really start getting eased until my early 30s when I had a spiritual awakening and started going down that path. Not to say the suffering was gone by any means. In fact, in some cases it got worse. But it led me to a place where I learned how to let it go. I learned how to see what it was. That the suffering was a gift to help me awaken from the pain of this conditioned system that we're all brought up in. This illusion that makes us think that we should be something other than what we are, deep down. It creates this disconnect in our mind, in our bodies. Because there is something within you that knows who you are, that knows what you're here to do and why. And every moment that you resist it and try and move towards something else, something false, you will feel that disconnect within you, and it will cause the mental issues. And for however long you continue to move away from who you truly are, that suffering will get worse. Because here you are moving towards something that society has told you will make you happy, but it doesn't. And so you try to numb that pain with addictions. Insert your addiction here, it doesn't matter. It could be smoking, drinking, partying, gambling, watching pornography. The addiction doesn't matter, it's a placeholder. And if you are still in that state and you manage to overcome one addiction, then it's very likely that another one will take its place. Or you will be left with this feeling of being lost. Removing the addictions doesn't address the core issue, right? And so you're still left with this feeling of emptiness, of being off your path. But what I've discovered is the easiest way to get back on that path is to confront your suffering, is to move into it and feel what it is trying to tell you. Now, the best way that I am able to do this is through meditation. So if you are currently languishing in suffering, then I highly recommend daily meditation. It helps strip away all the artifice, all of the nonsense you've collected in your life, and it helps you focus on that inner being of what you truly are. It helps you see who you truly are. And when you see that, you can move towards it and you can heal the suffering. That's not to say that you're never going to suffer again. Suffering is going to be a lifetime experience for you, but you're going to go through bouts of rising above it and then falling back within it when you fall into your old habits again. I'll give you a great example. Yesterday, I woke up feeling horrible. Feeling like I haven't felt in years. I was angry and irritable and just awful. It felt like I was burning on the inside. I was so angry and I didn't even know why. But I was mad at my husband. I was mad at my computer. I was mad at the kitchen. I was mad at everything. I have never felt so murderous as I did yesterday. And so after, of course, I have this big yelling match with my husband, which was completely my fault. I picked the fight because I was in such a bad mood. I come home and I meditate. And I swear within 5 minutes I saw what was happening. The day before I had gone on Twitter. And that was a huge mistake. Twitter is a quagmire for negative energy. And I had absorbed that. And so the next day that had just manifested within and I felt like I wanted to die. It hurt that much because I wasn't used to it anymore. Luckily, I've found a way out of that where most of the time I'm in a really good place. And so when I fall into that negative way of thinking, it hurts. It hurts so bad. You want to die. And that's saying something. But when I rose out of it through the meditation, I could see that I needed that experience to remind me how to connect with spirit or the higher power. I could see it so clearly. I could see that I was holding myself away with my thoughts because of old habits. I used to be a very angry, irritable person. That was my default, really, that I had learned from my parent. And it was what I applied to the world when things felt frustrating. I made my own suffering happen out of habit. But when I meditated, I could see through all of that. I could see that the suffering was there to help me find my way back. The reason it hurt so much was to jolt me out of this old habit that I had fallen into so that I could find my way out. The pain was there to help me find my way out. And when I did, instantaneously, all those negative feelings were gone. It was like I became a different person in the flash of a second. I learned from that suffering how to rise above it again. Now that's all fine and dandy, but what do you say to someone who's suffering from terminal cancer, or who's been in a horrible accident where they've been brutally mangled? What do you say to those people? It seems extraordinarily insensitive to say to them, well, you're just on a spiritual awakening journey. Feel into the pain and you'll arise. Try telling that to anyone who's suffering, who isn't aware of that spiritual journey. They'll hate you for it. But just because they don't know that it's an indicator to awaken, doesn't mean that that's not what's happening. Every single person on this planet, and I would argue every single consciousness in this universe, is on an awakening path. It doesn't matter if you're aware of it or not. It's happening. And so suffering is going to continue to happen to everyone to jolt them into the right direction. But it's up to us whether or not we recognize that indicator and move through it, move through the pain and accept it. That's what I had to do in meditation. I had to first accept that I was in this chaotic state of mind. I couldn't push it away. I had to accept it. And through the acceptance of it, I could see what it was and why it was there and what it was trying to teach me. Without that suffering, I wouldn't have risen up more in my frequency. Because that's what happened. I seriously felt like I got an upgrade yesterday. After I meditated, after I sat with it, after I saw it. I could feel the energy flowing through me more clearly, more fluidly, more powerfully. I could feel my frequency raise. And it never would have happened without that suffering. I think those of us who suffer the most have the most potential to rise higher. When you learn how to overcome that pain, there is such a momentum behind it. If you envision a pendulum, a pendulum that swings back and forth with equal momentum. If that pendulum is just kind of going back and forth near the bottom, just a tiny little click, 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 doesn't have the momentum to get high up to the top parts of that pendulum. If you envision your frequency kind of the same, you have to be able to go as high into one side in order to go as high on the other. So if you see it as one side being the light and one side being the dark, you have to go as deep into the dark as you go high into the light. This is the principle of rhythm. Everything is balanced, and that balance must be observed. So keeping that in mind, the deeper you go into the darkness, into the pain, into the suffering, the higher you can rise into the light and the joy and the love. But you have to go through the suffering first. You have to understand that they are two parts of a whole. It is the yin and the yang, the dark and the light. They cannot exist without each other. This path is about making peace with both and finding a harmony within, walking the middle path. If you envision yourself on a tightrope, one side is the light, the other is the dark. You could fall into either. But if you stay on that middle path, embracing them both and keeping your mind focused on that tightrope, and you keep walking, then you become the master of both. You embrace the dark and the light so that you can hold yourself in the middle. That's where the true power lies. That's where power over yourself lies. You have to embrace them both. You have to suffer in order to find relief. So if you're stuck in that suffering right now, give thanks for it. No matter how hard that is, and I know that sounds ridiculous, depending on how much you're suffering, but you need to embrace it. You need to love it. You need to see it as a teacher, there to help you pivot into the direction that you truly want to go. There is no malevolence in it. There's no punishment. You didn't deserve this suffering. It is merely here to help you grow, physical pain included. Physical pain exists in the mind. It can be rewired, but it first has to be experienced in the soul. You have to see what it is before you can let it go. This takes a lot of meditation. The first time I saw this, or I realized it, I was in the midst of a 10-day silent retreat meditation. There were no external distractions. All we had to do was focus on meditation. So I kind of got a jump start into how to see these things, how to focus on them, how to move them, how to release them. But what I learned is that all pain begins in the mind, and you are in control of the mind. And when you see that suffering for what it is, and you can let it go, it's like you come up for air. You rocket up, out from the bottom of the ocean, up to the top, just like that. There's no time in between. There's no healing process. There's just darkness, then light. All of a sudden, you're healed. When Jesus was performing his miracles, he could only perform those miracles for people who believed, for people who had faith strong enough to believe that he could heal them. Belief is magic. If you believe that you will suffer and languish for all your days, then you will. If you believe you can heal it and come out of it and rise above it, then you will. You must believe that you can rise above suffering, that you can heal yourself, or it never will happen. You have the power to overcome anything, and you need no external force to do it. Those miracles would have happened regardless of whether Jesus placed his hands on them. If they simply believed they were healed, they would have been. It really seems to show you that the ability to overcome your suffering lies completely within you. You are at the wheel, and whatever way you turn is up to you. So if you want to stay in that suffering for a while longer, then you have every right to. But if you want to heal, then you can do it right now. Everything happens in the now. It doesn't take years of studying meditation in a Tibetan monastery. It only takes a simple shift that happens in the present moment, where you release all your attachments and you rise above them. It sounds so simple, and it really is, but you have to retrain your mind first, not to look for the suffering, not to look for the negativity. You have to train it to look for love and positivity and improvement and progress, abundance. It is a complete shift in your consciousness, but it always only ever happens in the now. So if you want to overcome your suffering, acknowledge that it is there to help you. It is there for your ultimate good. You must stop looking at it like a plague. You must see it as a teacher. And you must learn what it has to teach you. And then you can let it go and rise and be the being you are, free from all that pain. And when it comes back, that's an indicator that you have veered off that path again. You're turning down into the darkness, but it only takes an instant to steer yourself back. And that's the process of life, navigating that balance between dark and light, dark and light. You always go back and forth, because every time you go back into the darkness, it's an opportunity to learn more, to take you higher into the light. It is a gift if you wish to awaken. See it as such, honor it, and rise above it. And I think that's where I will leave this one today. I apologize if it seemed a bit rambly. There's a lot that goes with suffering, and I barely scratched the surface. But I hope this was helpful. If it was, I would be very appreciative if you would like and follow or subscribe to this podcast. And if you wish to support me further, I have a Patreon, which you can also check out. All the links are in the description. And so until next time, I wish you light, love, and harmony. Thank you for joining me.